Today I'm going to paint the Bougainvillea flower. I'll be demonstrating various watercolor techniques like blending two colors, picking up pigment to create that translucent petal, glazing to deepen the pigment colors. But first I want to give you just a tiny bit of history of how this beautiful flower got its name. So this flower was named after Louis Antoine de Bougainvillea, and he was commissioned by Louis XV to go around the world and find unclaimed territory for France. And he invited his friend Philibert to come with him because this friend had just lost his wife in childbirth and he wanted to cheer him up. So he brought him along, and on their adventures they came to Tahiti, where they found the Bougainvillea flower and fell in love with this flower, and it was just so beautiful. And Philibert was so pleased that his friend Bougainvillea had invited him on the adventure. So he was a botanist and he named this flower after his good friend. So there you have it. So now let's get into this painting. So as you can see, I first sketched out just the very outside sort of outlines of the main features of this image. In the right hand upper corner you can see my reference photo. So I sketched out each of the petals, and then I went in with water, one petal at a time, and I would fill the petal with water, and then I'm adding the pigment. And this flower is really just, it lends itself so beautifully to the process of watercoloring, because if you look at this flower in real life, it sort of looks like a watercolor in that it has two different colors blended together, and really that is what draws me to watercolor, and that you can just, it just naturally blends together, and two colors, and it just really comes out beautifully. So you can see, in an effort to make this sort of translucent petals, I drop the pigment down in the wet area, and then I dry my brush off and get all of the pigment and all of the water off of my brush. Not all, but I dry it off with a napkin. And then if you drag that dry brush over the area where you've dropped the pigment, it just picks up just some of the pigment and really lightens wherever you're touching and causes that beautiful kind of translucent area. And I absolutely love that technique, specifically for this flower. So as each of the petals are drying, as you can see, I'm sort of skipping around because as I add a layer of pigment to one petal, I want that to really dry and do its natural blending. So I move to another petal to add its color and whatnot, so that I can then go back to it and it's already dry. So now I'm adding the center parts of the flowers, and in my mind, in real life, those little stems below the little white flowers would be delicate and thin. But if you look at the reference photo, they are sort of substantial and thick. So I thought I would keep it true to the reference photo and keep them thick. Now I'm adding all of these little veins that really are sort of like what stands out to me in a bougainvillea flower. And because the video is quite sped up, it looks like, oh, she's just sort of, dropping these little veins in, and it's just this little quick, couple minutes. But it was quite time consuming and labor intensive, because you've got to have a very light hand and just barely touch the page and allow that pigment to just sort of stream in those little vein patterns, and yeah, it took quite a long time to create these veins, but I was thrilled with how it was coming out. So now that everything's dry, the veins are dry and everything's dry, now I can go in and glaze over and add pigment. So what I'm doing there is over the top. If you don't let it dry and then you start to do this, it just muddies everything up, and then really what I would be doing would be erasing all of those little veins. But because it's dry, I can take pigment. See the top here? I'm taking this pigment and just sort of dragging it down and deepening the color without sacrificing all the veins that I had added in. So it's just going over the top there. And yeah. And it's a way to sort of still see the orange underneath come through, because that pink that you're adding is just very light. Yeah. Also, you can see that, when I use a reference photo like I'm doing now, I always try to make it my own. And I would encourage you to, if you're going to use a reference photo for your painting, to maybe add a leaf here or there, or leave out leaves or stems, so that you're not just completely recreating what you see, but that you're taking your own sort of take and artistic license with it. So now, see these little flowers here? They have white on them and white watercolor. Oh, here I'm hair drying it. I'm using a hair dryer to dry the whole painting because I want to put in a background. And see, I'm using water and just a tiny bit of pigment, of green pigment in there in the back. If I took this sort of mop brush and I dropped all this water in the white spaces and I hadn't hair dried it, then everything would just bleed around and really, I feel, ruin it. Sometimes watercolors look cool when they're all sort of bled into each other, but that's not my style. And if you guys have watched me paint before, you know that I'm like just all about the details, and it's almost a challenge and maddening to me when things aren't, just so. So if you can see on the white page there's a white dot of paint. That's from a Posca pen. So that's a paint pen, and I just push the little nib of the pen onto the page and let that drop of white paint go on. I use this Posca paint whenever I want to put white highlights in, because I feel like it really makes it pop. And there's my Bougainvillea.